Thank you. Good afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon to the first panel. I'm Herb Kanan, the Post diplomatic correspondent, and I have the privilege of moderating this first session. Since everyone here except for one person spoke this morning, there's no real reason to do any long introductions except to introduce Yaakov Katz, the trustworthy and insightful defense correspondent for the Post. Welcome, Yaakov. Otherwise, welcome again former Prime Minister Ehud Olmert, former Chief of Staff Gabi Ashkenazi, former Mossad head Meir Dagan, former Air Force Commander and presently El Al CEO Eliezer Shkedi. By the way, this is an interesting constellation because each of these four men were in key positions when Israel, at least according to foreign reports, bombed a Syrian nuclear facility in 2007. We're also joined by Environment Minister Gilad Erdan and Jerusalem Post correspondent Carolyn Glick. And now to the topic. The events sweeping the region, the so-called and perhaps misnamed Arab Spring and Iran's nuclear march, have variously been dubbed an earthquake, a tidal wave, a hurricane, a tsunami. Pick your geological or weather metaphor. The overarching question that I'd like the panel to focus on now is what Israel has to do right now to avoid being either swallowed up or swept away by these events. The format of the discussion, securing Israel's place in the new Middle East, what needs to be done, will be that I'll pose a question to each of our panelists, give them 4 or 5 minutes to answer, perhaps with a follow-up, and then open the discussion up for questions from the audience and for input from the other panelists. I'd like to remind the panelists that our time is limited. We have to be out of here by 3:30, so if you could keep your answers concise, that would be very, very helpful. Lieutenant General Ashkenazi, I'd like to start with you, sir. You became Chief of Staff after the Second Lebanese War and are largely accredited with bringing the Army up to snuff after that war. You were the Chief of Staff during Operation Cast Lead, where the Army performed much better than it did in Lebanon. Some, however, say that the IDF stopped short before the job was done and that it should have continued into Gaza City and toppled Hamas. Why was the decision made to stop? Was it a mistake? And in your estimation, to secure our place in the region, will Israel at one time or another have to militarily destroy Hamas? And is that possible? 5 minutes.
I thought you were going to ask about the flotilla. But yeah, I had the privilege to be the Chief of Staff during the Cast Lead operation. I think it was a just operation and a very important one. I think the situation before Cast Lead operation was unbearable. We saw, all of us, we saw how we evacuated Sderot sometimes and other places as well. I think there is a person in this panel who can answer much better the question why we stop or whatever, because I don't know how it works in the United States, but in Israel we work for the political process, not vice versa. So usually we discuss the objectives before that, and I must say that under the former Prime Minister Olmert, we had a very intensive, open, and a long dialogue with our cabinet about the objectives. And it started, I recall, it started by people who talk about the destruction of Hamas. And it's ended in fairly limited objective at the end of the day. And I think we can easily conquer Gaza. It's not a question. I think the question is what we want to achieve and in what price. And I think that's at the end of the day. But, I mean, we have a very strong military. It's a deadly force. The question is, I think from my perspective, not from the soldier, is not how you start a war, how you ended it. And that source of question were there. For instance, you cannot destroy the Hamas just by standoff weaponry or whatever. We have a cutting-edge technology. I think we are probably the leading military in some of the unique capabilities around UAVs, guided ammunition, precise intelligence, and very, very efficient in responding to targets who emerge in a battlefield. But that's not enough. In order to destroy the Hamas, you're talking about people. The infrastructure of an organization like this, an hybrid organization, is the people. So you have to control and occupy Gaza and then do all the rest of it. Kind of a protective shield, as we did in the West Bank. And that's something that was on the table. At the end result was to do something more limited, to be ready to do it, but if we can gain the right level of deterrence and inflicting enough damage to the Hamas, we may stop along this way. But we were ready to do everything.
But was the deterrence gained? I mean, we saw what's happened ever since. Will there be a need to go back in and...
Well, yeah, I think professionally, if you think about the Israeli war, we never really decided a country. We defeated a military organization. and the price of doing that is sometimes too much. We never conquered Syria or Egypt and even other organizations. Take the Hezbollah. With all the criticism in Lebanon, Second Lebanon War, we cannot ignore the fact that we reached some level of deterrence. I am around with the Hezbollah from the beginning, from '82, when Murnia, God bless him, when Murnia started to drive, when Murnia started to drive, God bless his soul.
Murnia.
Yeah.
In English and in Arabic, there is not identity in the meaning of this statement. In Arabic, you say Alay Rahmo.
I'm more articulate in Arabic than Alay Rahmo. When Murnia started in '82, this truck bombing and all this stuff, so I'm pretty familiar with Hezbollah, put it this way. Even sometimes it's too personal. We must acknowledge that we have never experienced such a long period of tranquility in the northern border. It's unprecedented. We have never achieved it with our previous round with Hezbollah. It's significant to me to see youngsters, young kids in the northern part of Israel, in Kiryat Shmona and the kibbutzim, entering elementary school, first grade, without being in a shelter, even for one night. That's happened due to the result, with all the problems that we had, and we had professional problems during. So we achieved the level of deterrence. I think with the Hamas the same. Now, what you really want to do is to get a high achievement with a low price, and sometimes it's tough to get it. We can destroy the Hamas, but we have to stay in Gaza in order to do it. And then it's raised the question, who is going to replace us? Are you going to give it to Abu Mazen? Are you going to give it to what? To the UN forces? Do you expect some Norwegian boys to protect us from Gaza? I'm not. So this is one of the answers. Are we going to engage once again with the Hamas? Probably so. But that's pretty much the situation in Israel. You're living between this round. And our mission in the military is to end it in a way that nobody will ask who won and who loses. And that was part of the problem in the Second Lebanon War.
Thank you, Lieutenant General. Mr. Dagan, I'd like to ask you, since you left office, you've been, how should I say, rather outspoken about Israeli military action against Iran. You mentioned that again this morning, saying this should only be done at the very last result, and when the dagger is actually against our throat. Yuval Diskin, the former head of the Shabak, kind of echo those comments a bit more caustically on Saturday with harsh criticism towards the Prime Minister and Defense Minister. Also, you said today as well that this is an international problem, not an Israeli one, that demands an international solution. President Obama said recently that both Iran and Israel recognize that when the U.S. says it's unacceptable for Iran to have nuclear weapons, he means what he says. He also said that the Israeli government realizes that the U.S. president doesn't bluff, that he has, quote unquote, our back. My question to you, sir, is does he have our back? Can we count on Obama?
I'm glad you asked about that.
I'm not an American citizen, and I don't think it's appropriate that I'm an Israeli citizen will present a point of view of the president of the most strongest nation in this world. I believe, I'm assuming, when the president of the United States is making a commitment, I'm going under the assumption that he's going to fulfill it. And I'm not referring to Obama or to somebody else. I believe that anyone who is taking the role of the President of the United States is obliged, first of all, to operate on behalf of the interests of the United States and on the interests of their friends and allies. And when the President said that he had no intention of letting Iran reaching to a nuclear capability, he is referring to an American interest, and I believe that he is going to fulfill his duty regarding to protecting the United States and its interests. Then I don't think that I'm entitled of presenting a point of view of the President.
So let me ask you another question, which I think you are entitled to answer, and that's, what do you think about Yuval Diskin's comments and his characterization of the Prime Minister and the Defense Minister as being messianic?
Yuval Diskin is a very serious man. He's a very capable man. He has a great deal of experience in confronting terror. I believe that he spoke on the issue that he really believes, and if you want to ask him this question, I would suggest that you refer to him on this issue.
But do you think it's appropriate for him to make those kind of comments? I mean, he could have made them when he was the head of Shabak.
First of all, I think that he presented his point of view clearly and loudly about his views to the Prime Minister and to the Defense Minister. He didn't announce it. It was done in closed rooms. That he never hid his opinion about many issues. To spoke openly. I heard about your member of your party is now formulating a law. I really want to thank her, because it will be the first time in my life that somebody is going to mention a law on behalf of my name, the law of the gun, and preventing of people in the military establishment or in security of speaking. Let me remind you something, sir, that it started with Germany in the beginning. You know how you're starting it, you don't know how you're ending it. About Diskin, I believe that he is a very serious one. He presents his point of view, and I know from first hand that those points of view were presented by him to the Prime Minister, to the Defense Minister, on many occasions.
Mr. Shkedi, Mr. Dagan has gone on record in the past as saying that we cannot knock out Iran's nuclear program.
Don't you want me to comment?
Yeah. Would you like to comment, please?
I must say that I'm quite surprised to hear what Mayor Dagan said, because, you know, I admire whatever Mayor did and Gabi and Yuval Diskin for the security of Israel. But even though we are a democracy, and I must tell you that I hope I didn't understand correct what you mentioned about Germany. We're a democracy, and any member of Knesset, every member of Knesset can suggest whatever he wants, and if it will get a majority in the Knesset, so it will be a law in Israel. It doesn't mean that the government agrees with every initiative that comes from the Knesset. But I must say that it's quite surprising to hear people like Yuval Diskin that served under Prime Minister Netanyahu and under Minister of Defense Ehud Barak, and if he thought in real time...
Gilad, I don't want to interrupt you, just technically. He did not serve under Barak because the only person who is responsible
is the Prime
and
Minister.
in charge of the head of the security services is the Prime Minister, not the Minister of Defense.
Okay, thank you very much, but I know that. What I meant is that...
Just say the opposite.
No, thank you very much. I know that. I know that the Shabak is under the Prime Minister office. I also used to work there 16 years ago in the Prime Minister office. But the Minister of Defense, still, they work together. And if Yuval Diskin thought that our policy, or we're doing things that are so dangerous for the future of Israel, so in order to save Israel, he should resign and not wait 5 years as head of Shabak, and then even to ask for, to agree to serve 1 more year. And then, when resigning, and when Prime Minister does not accept his guy to be appointed to be head of Shabak,
It's not true.
then
You are lying, sir. It's not true.
you are not following Helen Dershowitz orders to that panel.
I'm maybe not polite, but I prefer that ministers of the State of Israel will speak the truth.
I prefer that heads of Mossad and Shabak won't make a damage to our efforts for the awareness of the Iranian threat. That's what I expect from you, that when Prime Minister Netanyahu goes around the world, and he never said that we're going to attack Iran or when or where, but he's doing a lot of efforts in order to raise the awareness, and it is working. You see the economic sanctions, and you go out, and Yuval Diskin is going out and saying, you shouldn't do this, you shouldn't do that, Israel can attack, Israel cannot attack. We don't think that you did what you did for the security of Israel, and we admire it. If you want to join the political party, maybe we should consider even to what you offered, that you can run to the Knesset after 1 year or even less than that. But don't hide behind. Don't hide behind theories or things like Yuval Diskin said. They live in Caesarea or I don't know where. You said he's a serious guy. How can a serious guy said they are not the Messiah? Who said that they are the Messiah? I don't even understand what he said.
Mr. Dagan, I think we'll stop there on this issue, and I'll move on to Mr. Shkedi. Mr. Dagan has gone on record in the past saying that we cannot knock out Iran's nuclear program. At best, we can only delay it for a number of years, and they'll probably speed up their ability to get the bomb anyhow. Do you agree with that? Or can, in your estimation, the Air Force knock out Iran's nuclear facilities?
No doubt that I do not intend to talk about capabilities. I would like to say a couple of words about Iran, according to what I just heard. First of all, no doubt that we should not allow Iran to have nuclear capability at the end, at the bottom line. I think that all the people in this stage and the whole agree. The second thing is there are 3, let's say, areas until now that we faced something like this. Iraq, Syria, according to what you say, and Iran.
Reports.
No doubt that Iran is not the same story as in Iraq or in Syria. The third issue is the United States. From my point of view, working and fighting with the United States and with the whole world against nuclear capability of Iran is something that we must do. We must do. Why? Because it's not a very specific issue. It's much wider. From the military point of view, from the economical point of view, from the process itself. Maybe it should be, and it will be, an ongoing process, not one shot. So I think that if you are doing it with the United States, with the whole world, by the way, I'm sure that it's a problem of the whole world, and not only Israel, is something that is the best way to do. From the point of view of Israel, no doubt that the Air Force and the IDF should prepare themselves in the best way that they can. And they are doing it. I have the honor to command the Air Force more than 4 years ago. And we did a lot in order to reach the ability to do what we should be able to do. But the bottom line, I think that this alternative should be the last alternative. The last alternative. Now it's the question, what is the meaning if you are doing it before the Americans or with the Americans? I do not want to enter to this area. It's a complicated area, and I think this is not the place to talk about it. So this is from what my point of view about the issue. I would like to add one interesting thing that I didn't hear today, and I think it's important to say. You know, we are thinking logically, and we are preparing in a logical way. I would like to say that one of the things that I'm concerning about is the fact that I'm not sure that they are thinking logically. What I mean, to hear Ahmadinejad talking about the Mahdi in the UN is something that really concerning me. To those of you that do not know who is the Mahdi is Muhammad, the 12 Imam. She is Imam like the Mashiach in the Jewish, the Messiah, like in our thoughts. He disappeared in 868, and one of the conditions in order to let the Mahdi come is Armageddon or Gog and Magog. It means something big. Honestly, I'm concerning about this not logical way of thinking, this irrational way of thinking. So it's a combination, the rational way and the illogical way. As we said before, it's a very complicated issue.
There's this whole debate now whether Iran is a rational actor or an irrational actor.
It's a combination. I think it's a combination. A couple of years ago, I read almost every word about the Iranians. Every word. Nowadays, a little bit less, but there are two branches, the logical branch and the irrational branch, and I think that we have to, all the time, think where we are. But to say the bottom line, we should not let Iran to have nuclear capability. We have to let the United States and the whole world to lead it, and we must be prepared to do whatever is needed according to the government of Israel, elected government of Israel, but as the last step, the last step.
You said this is an ongoing process, and this thing's been going on since 1995. Do you imagine a situation where this thing could schlep on for decades, with the Iranians, when the heat gets too hot, they move back, and then when the world's attention goes elsewhere, they go back onto it?
In a way, I think yes. I think that the Iraqi issue was one thing, and it was one shot. According to what you said about Syria, it was one shot. About Iran, no one can shake hands that, and will promise that it will be one shot. No one knows it. It can be a process, an ongoing process, a year after year. And I think that if the United States and the whole world is with you, it's a totally different story.
Yaakov Katz, you've covered the military beat now for a number of years. You covered the Second Lebanon War, Operation Cast Lead, the Mavi Marmara. In each of those cases, Israel got clobbered in the international media. What, in your estimation, needs to be done for the military, the IDF, to get their narrative out there better? And is it possible in a military confrontation in which the world increasingly treats less as a war zone and more as a crime scene to battle the difficult images? Have you noticed any improvement over time?
First of all, I think definitely there's been improvement. There's more awareness, a situational awareness that the fact that the battlefield is not just being fought in Lebanon or in Gaza or wherever it might be, but there's also the home front. And I think Gabi Ashkenazi spoke about that earlier, about the missiles that can land anywhere within Israel. But there's also the public diplomatic or the public diplomacy front. And I think that the IDF is much more aware of it. Avi Benayahu is the spokesman, did a lot to promote that cause as well as under the current IDF spokesman. But I think that there's still a lot more to go. In other words, just as an example, we talk a lot about how, I remember even being at a briefing once with General Ashkenazi where he showed us a 3D video which was simulated of how Hezbollah stores one of their most sophisticated missiles called the M600, which they're believed to have several dozen, if not more, which have a range of several hundred kilometers, can strike with anywhere within Israel with a half-a-ton warhead. And in this simulated 3D video, we saw how they're storing them inside homes. Now then, a few months later, we had a briefing, I remember up at Northern Command Headquarters in Tzfat, where we were shown how, by the head intelligence officer of the Northern Command, another simulated 3D image with satellite footage and maps of the village of El Khiyam, which is several kilometers north of Israel's border with Lebanon, and exactly how they're storing their capabilities in homes and houses and hospitals and schools and command and control centers, etc. I don't know that the world has yet to completely internalize that that's exactly what's going to happen. When we speak about the future war, the big war, the great war with Iran, and the war that will ensue, the hundreds and thousands of missiles that will land on Israel in the wake of an attack, a potential Israeli strike against Iran, Goldstone report will be peanuts compared to what we could expect in the future. And therefore, if you ask me, and compared to the people sitting here on the panel, who am I? But I would say that we have a lot more to do to educate the world for them to be aware of what's going to happen. Because if we want to prevent the next report, we have to tell them today that Hamas's missiles, and we have to show them the proof. We have to disseminate that information as quickly and as widely as possible, because otherwise, it's the war that's going to come. Hopefully we'll win, and I'm sure we will win, but the public diplomacy war that will follow, I'm not sure that we'll be any better off today than we were in the past.
General Ashkenazi?
When I talk about the changing nature of war, I meant to this issue. I think we have to explain to our friends professionally and to the world that this change has a reason. And we call it the mukawma. Mukawma is in Arabic the resistant. It's deliberately done basically from several reasons. They go to the urban area. It's their choice, not because there are no open area in Lebanon or in Gaza. They're going to there from they think they will be more defended by being in an urban area. We will have more problem in separating between them and the regular innocent population, and giving our norms and code of ethics and whatever, we will be reluctant to exercise our full capacity or full capability. Secondly, being a Western society which is more sensitive to casualties, we will be reluctant to go to this urban, messy, bloody war type of fighting. And I think we cannot allow to the Hezbollah, Hamas, or for that purpose to other terrorists in Iraq, in Fallujah, a safe haven. We cannot allow them. And I think it's not very difficult to explain. When I was in some of the most challenging, media in the States, take the New York Times, very prestige. It was a challenge, not like in a Fox News, for instance. But I described...
Or the Jerusalem Post.
Or the Jerusalem Post. No, that's a home run. I describe a situation where I have to take decision. Let's say, most populated area in the Middle East, Jabalia refugee camp. U.S. censor observed a Hamas team preparing a Qassam rocket to launch to Ashkelon. Nobody argued that it's a Qassam rocket. Nobody argued it's a Hamas. Now it's in the most populated area. What are you going to do? I have no hesitation. I think we have to destroy this Qassam rocket. So what we do, we don't bombard discriminately the area. We take the most precise, expensive piece of weapons that we have, and we knock down these Qassam rockets. And while we are doing it, very well may happen that a young child 10 meters from there will get a shrapnel in his head and die. So it's not just a collateral damage. It's sad, okay? But it's not. It was not my choice to launch the rocket from there, and I have the obligation to protect my civilian. And even according to international law, that's my first priority. The priorities go: your citizen, your soldiers, their citizen, their soldiers, or soldiers. They're not soldiers. So I think we have to develop this scenario and to explain it. I think it would be a huge mistake if Israel will accept the logic of Hezbollah and Hamas. We cannot allow them to have a safe haven. And if they put, and they do, put their launching capability in villages, those villages are going to be bombarded. And that's why we published the map where they put all of this. So I think nobody will surprise once we're going to do it in Lebanon. That's the way to do it. And I have no hesitation to do it and to order the Air Force, or for that matter the infantry, to go in and to clean the area.
Thank you. Minister Erdan, in recent days, the settlement issue was once again moved to center stage in Israel, even threatening perhaps the coalition. You called for removing Defense Minister Ehud Barak's authority over the settlements and transferring them to a ministerial committee. You have, to a certain degree, become a champion of the settlements inside the Likud. My question is simple: why? Why are the settlements so important for you, and how do you answer those who say that they are a burden, they are a real burden on Israel, and in the country's efforts to secure itself 64 years down the road, they should be removed, not only because of the demographic issue, but also because they are continuously used as a club by the international community to bash upon Israel at a time where Israel needs the international community?
First of all, do you hear me? First of all, thank you for the compliment, because I really see the settler as Israel's pioneers those days. And when you say that there are people who think that they are a burden on Israel, first of all, we must say the truth. The truth is that there were many people and countries in the international community that were against Israel, even before 1967. And looking on terror activities against Israel, it started much before the 1967 war. So it's very hard to try to connect between the settlements to the security situation that Israel is dealing with, or even with the criticism that we are getting around the world. And as I mentioned in my speech this morning, even when we evacuated unilaterally from Lebanon or unilaterally from Gaza, and I remember very well Prime Minister, distinguished Prime Minister, who said, and I believe that they meant it, that after evacuating, after unilateral withdrawing from Lebanon, from Gaza, if they will fire missiles on Israel, we will do whatever is needed, and it will be justified, and everyone will support Israel. So exactly as Gabi Ashkenazi described, the pictures will be always stronger than the justification or what is needed to do to confront terrorism. And talking about your question about the settlement, I cannot agree with those arguments. So when I don't agree and I think that it is not the truth, I cannot build my policy due to the criticism that I get that is based on lies. So if you'll ask me about the future agreement, peace agreement, hopefully one day we'll have peace. So it's not necessarily that we should evacuate people from their homes. We are living together in Israel with more than 1 million Israeli Arabs who define themselves as Palestinian, and no one says, and I don't support that in a future peace agreement they should be evacuated. So first of all, as I said this morning, let's agree that each part has the right to exist. The Palestinian state would be an Arab state, we will be the Jewish state. We can argue about the future borders, and then we'll see. But to say that the obstacle for peace are the settlement is totally a lie, and I'm not going to base my policy or my ideology on lies. So, and I understand very well that the international community is using, some of them, of course, not everyone, are using the settlements to build the criticism on Israel, but there's no other way than to repeat again and again and again on our claims, and the claim is that, those are the facts, if someone cares for the fact, that Jews were living in Judea and Samaria for thousands of years. A Palestinian state never existed in Judea and Samaria before 1967. And those are the facts that even if you're from the left wing, you agree with that. But
Mr. Are you in favor of a two-state solution? And in a two-state solution, can you have the settlements in the West Bank?
First of all, it's not that not me, I'm too young, but the state of Israel wasn't established in order to create a Palestinian state. Sometimes I hear it so much. We are facing reality. We are facing reality in the Middle East. And now, when I understand that a former prime minister signed the agreement, and we see whatever happened in our region, I think that it's not that I support a Palestinian state, and even after what happened in our region, we must reconsider it again. But it is something that I don't see any other better solution now for the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians. So that's what I think.
But can you have that solution with the settlements where they are?
As I said, I think that it's not necessarily have to be that people should be evacuated from their homes. It's not, a Minister of Foreign Affairs used to say that such a demand is like the Germans, talking about the Germans, to create a Judenrein. We will have one state, a Jewish state, but with huge, big Arab minorities, and on the other side we'll have a Palestinian state without Jewish right to live there if they prefer to do so. So I think that everything should be open for discussions, and we cannot say from the beginning, before we enter the peace talks, that the settlement should be evacuated. And I think that even left-wing activists are saying today that had the settlement were not exist, so the discussion today would be on the 1948 borders. I think that everyone knows that very well, and it helps us a lot that they exist, and they have their human rights, civil rights, human rights, exactly as any other citizens in the state of Israel. They are not different from any other, every other citizen in the state of Israel. So talking about evacuating them, they are growing their children and grandchildren, and we have a policy talking about the outpost, maybe. We have a policy that whatever was built on a private land should be evacuated if it's not legal, and what was built on the country's land should be stayed and should be legalized. But the problem is, of course, and anyone knows that, everyone knows that, that if you're a Palestinian and you sold your land to a Jew, you're going to get death penalty. So even if someone will go to the court and claiming that this land belongs to someone, and the settlers will come out with papers that will prove that they bought the land, so the Palestinian guy will say, no, I never sold it to them, they lied to me, and then it will go to the court, maybe to the Supreme Court. And former governmental policy was that if it's a private land, even if the settlers has their own claims, meanwhile, we will evacuate that settlement. We want to change that policy. We do not agree with that. We want to have to support the settlers' rights to try to convince the courts in Israel that they have the rights and they bought the land.
Thank you. Carolyn, how do you answer those who say that the situation with the Palestinians as it exists now is simply unsustainable, that demographically Israel is going to be swallowed up, and that the country needs to withdraw from the West Bank to ensure its future as a Jewish democratic state, to say nothing about the corrosive effects that some argue holding on to the West Bank has on the country, on the society?
Say that they're wrong. I think, it's very interesting because back in 2004, I think it was, a group of Israeli and American researchers got together and started counting the number of Palestinians who live in Judea and Samaria and in Gaza at that time. And what they found was that all of the projections for demographic demise of Israel, based upon a Palestinian census that was conducted in 1997 by the PLO, and they inflated the number of Palestinians west of the Jordan River by over 1 million. And that if Israel were to assert its sovereignty over Judea and Samaria tomorrow, that we would have a 2/3 Jewish majority. They also checked and saw that Israeli fertility rates are increasing and the Palestinian fertility rates are decreasing. And we, of course, have massive potential for Aliyah, which has always been a thing that has maintained Israel's demographic dominance of the state. And, I think that it's important, first of all, to bear those data in mind when you're making the argument, because when you make arguments based upon numbers, and certainly when you're basing it on projected numbers over time, it's important that at least the basis of the data that you're using is accurate. What we've been doing is basing our demographic projections of Israel on false data that has led to a defeatism among Israeli leaders and even among just regular Israeli civilians who think that we have no choice but to give in. So that's one thing. I think it's important to understand the data for what they are and to base, again, our projections for the future, at least on accurate data regarding the present. The second thing that I think it's important to recognize is that, demography is not deterministic. A lot of different things can happen, but we also have to realize we're not the only country with a demographic problem. Just ask the French, ask the Brits, ask the Swedes, ask the Dutch, ask anybody. There is a problem for a lot of Western countries with minorities that are irredentist, that don't want to assimilate into majority culture, and that are making it difficult or making many countries in the world less and less governable. And the third thing that I think it's important to recognize is that if you're saying that we have a problem demographically, which we do, and again, this is not a unique Israeli problem, the question that you have to ask yourself is, would it be better or worse for Israel from a national security perspective? National security broadly defined, not only in terms of the strategic dangers that could be from an irredentist minority or from what it would be like to absorb these people within our population, and say the other alternative would be to establish a Palestinian terror state in Israel's heartland. And from my perspective, And again, that projection, that it would be a Palestinian terrorist state that does not recognize Israel's right to exist, is based upon past experience. In fact, it's not based upon any sort of yearning on my part for what things ought to look like, but actually what we've experienced since 1993 from the Palestinian Authority. And I think that we're better off with them inside than outside. And on this, I'm just going to conclude with one thing. You know, one of the speakers here was mentioning the Israeli Arabs, and that they self-define themselves, and they have begun to do so since 1993, essentially incrementally, have stopped defining themselves as Israelis and have started defining themselves as Palestinians. And we've seen many instances, and the gentleman on the stage with me can certainly talk about it in more detailed manner than I can, of Israeli Arabs who have participated in terrorist attacks against Israel. And it's true that we've had several bus bombings, for instance, that you had the collaboration of Israeli Arabs in the instigation of the terrorist attack, the Bahris, for instance, and the attack by Megiddo in 2003. But you have to ask yourself, why is it that we're not getting the kind of terrorism from Israeli Arabs that we're getting from Palestinian Arabs across the 1949 armistice lines? Why is it that you don't have the same kind of Hamas infrastructure, or Fatah infrastructure in the Galilee or in the Negev that you have in Jenin, that you have in Tulkarm, and so on and so forth? And my argument is that the reason that you haven't had that is because it's sovereign Israeli territory. And not that sovereign Israeli territory as in they're pro-Israel, but rather that our police are there, that our civilian authorities are there, that they are part of Israel. And it's much easier to defend yourselves from potential threats when you're in charge of the territory than when your enemies are in charge of the territory. So I think that from a strategic perspective, that the threat level that we would be facing from places like Jenin and Shechem and so on and so forth would be lower if we were in charge.
So you're advocating...
And they agree.
You're advocating annexing the areas right now? And what is it, again, what does it do to the society to be in control of that many people who don't want to be a part of it?
Look, you know, again, I mean, I think yes. I think that, first of all, I don't use the term annexation simply because under international law, binding international law, which is the 1922 League of Nations mandate for Palestine, which hasn't been superseded or canceled since, we are the sovereign. So just from an international legal perspective, I don't like the term annexation, but for purposes of argument, yes, I think that we should annex the entire area. We should annex Judea, we should annex Samaria.